What we like to do is get busy during times of emotion. What we like to do is figure out like projects we could do in our business, or like blame other people for what's going on, become victims, like all that kind of stuff is part of the human process, because we as humans do a really good job taking responsibility when the stakes are low, but the higher the stakes become, and the more that doesn't align with how we view ourselves and our own ID, the more we start to project that onto other people so that we don't have to deal with ourselves. And the world doesn't really feel like it's okay for wealthy people to have emotions. They don't feel like it's okay for wealthy people to be able to process those, because who are you to complain? What do you have to complain about? So just tuck it in because someone else has a life that's worse than yours and dealing with more difficult things. And, you know, the things I heard as a kid was there's people starving in Africa and all these kind of stories. And then what we do is we hold that in, and it starts to eat away at us, at our health, at our level of connection to ourselves and the way we view ourselves and whether we love ourselves or whether we express love to other people. And here's the detriment, is that we start to feel like the world is an unsafe and unfair place. We feel misunderstood, and this is why wealthy, successful entrepreneurs feel lonely, because they don't feel like it's okay to say, I don't feel well. What do you have to complain about? Who knows? Maybe it's stuff from your childhood that you've been trapping inside. I realize we hide behind the notion of business in our world today. Everybody says things like, it's not personal, it's business. Since when is it not personal? Since when has a business ever written a check? There's always someone's name on the check. There's always someone that had agreed to send that out. There's always a person that determined to have, whether it's an answering machine or whether it's an AI that's communicating with you. It was human beings that decided to do business. And somehow along the way, people decided that we could hide behind business and have a lack of integrity and want something for ourselves at the expense of another. These are people that you would see, great people in the community. They might donate their time. They might be loved and adored by their friends and their family and their spouse. But somehow, if we remove ourselves from personal and put it as business, then all of a sudden we become assholes. And we decide that we could get away with anything because it's business. And the notion and the rules of business have been zero-sum game. Take what you can. Everyone's out to get you. So get it while it's good. And ultimately, if they're wrong, then you're justified in every action that you take. And I'm going to raise my hand that for 13 hours, I was ready to play that game. I didn't sleep one night. I'm like, I'm going to be manipulative then. I'm gonna play chess instead of checkers. I'm gonna get mine. I started to think that way until I finally, in the morning, was like, if I do that, then I'm 100% in a losing game, lost who I am. And here's the hard thing, but the important thing is, A, what is it gonna take for me to get to a place to truly wanna see them succeed and be able to live a good life, number one. Number two, how could I be fully grateful for all of the good that came along the way? And 3 or C, I can't remember if I was doing numbers or letters, but you know what I'm saying. 1, 2, C, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. So number 3 is, as I look at this entire situation, how can I make sure never to allow that become a fuel for me to become competitive or have a chip on my shoulder? This is another way that people look at business and sports. How many athletes get a chip on their shoulder so they can be miserable even after they win? Most athletes are more upset when they lose than joyful when they win. Some of the best names we have, because they live by the chip on the shoulder. And in my one-man show, I talk about a chip on the shoulder may be motivating initially, but it leads to bitterness and anger and feeds a feeling of lack and scarcity. Here's the thing. We're in this game of business with a losing premise that we have something to prove to other people. And if we could just do something that they didn't think we could do, that will win the game. But when we get there and we've checked those boxes, it feels extraordinarily empty, especially when we find that it brought us less love, not more. Proving something to someone else doesn't have them go, oh my God, I was so wrong about you. Let me hug you and tell you how great you are. it actually pushes them away further because you're not looking at them, listening to them, seeing them, or understanding who they are as a human. You're too busy proving something wrong, and you are the container of the poison. You're not poisoning them. But what I realized, and I don't know if I've talked to this group about this before, but this was such a breakthrough and aha for me, is that I've gone through my life so often in the competitive nature, the masculine nature of being alpha. Alpha means I can give, I've got solutions, I'm gonna charge through. By the way, first off, that could be very exhausting for the people around you. But here was the thing I didn't understand. I thought beta meant being weak. And when we think beta means being weak, we hide from the moment of how we really feel and we put on a front. And that is that false bravado. That's that fake, I've got it all figured out. And what it does is it prevents us from the very answers from the people that we love or know because they can't serve us when we don't let them in. And so instead, I look at alpha as giving and beta as receiving. How good are you at receiving? I want you to really examine this for a minute. When you help someone because they ask for your support, and you care about them, after you've helped them, do you feel better or worse about yourself? Better. I mean, it's obvious when we say it. It's the elusive obvious when we're in the emotion, because the emotion blocks the level of intelligence we have around this. So this is something I want everyone to hold me accountable to, and I really want to be in my life, is the people I am so deeply bonded to in this world, like deeply bonded to, are the people that I showed up for when nobody else would show up for them, or they were down and out and the world was backing away because they didn't want to hurt their reputation being around this individual, or they didn't want to be associated. And we have so much fear based upon what we think others might think about us for supporting that person. And look, maybe those people have done things wrong, and maybe it's not always great, but what I know is that's the time I bond most deeply. When because for someone to reach out when they would never reach out takes such an act of courage and has them become so vulnerable that when you can show up loving and contributing, like I have someone that has sent thousands, literally thousands of paid clients over the last decade to my company. He hit a point where his business was in such disarray that he was going to the hospital with massive anxiety. And he had made a dozen people's business from nothing, just being associated with him, like a dozen at least. And most of them were my clients. So I called them and said, this person needed help. And who better to invest in if we support them financially and emotionally? Because as soon as they could remove the scarcity and know that they've been there for us, that we could be there for them, guess how many of the dozen people gave him $1? None. And so I went to my wife and I said, hey, look, he needs 200 grand. It's an investment in him. We've made way more than that with him. But I showed up and I gave him the money. Now I'm here to tell you it took him longer to pay me back. And the hardest thing for him was he was so disappointed in himself for not paying it that I had to regularly communicate and say, hey, just so you know, I know you're worried about the money. Can we just set that aside for another month? I know you're working on it, and just have dinner and just be okay about it. He's like, I know, but I feel so guilty and bad. I'm like, look, let me tell you a story. In 2008, I was over leveraged. I was launching Killing Sacred Cows, and I just led with my mistakes. I just shared with him the times that I was late of paying someone back. But I knew we were cut from the same cloth, and I eventually paid them back. It just took me longer than I planned. So what would it take to show up for people in their worst moments? Like, I feel like so many people in this world are known for their worst moment. And I sure am glad that not everybody knows my worst moment. I'm sure glad that's not how people label me, is by my worst moment. And so what I'm trying to say here is pain is proximity. It brings us closer to the lesson that we can't pay attention to until we go through the experience. And if we can go through that experience and see it as a gift, no matter how painful, it actually becomes a sharpening of our soul if we allow other people to support us. It becomes a resentment of the world if we stay isolated. So who's got your back? Who do you trust? Are you willing to open up? I want you to look at this in your own business and in your own life. And this is 100% on me. I didn't speak up when my intuition said to speak up. I was like, I'll just be a good team player. I'll just do it. And every time I didn't speak up, I became more robotic and disconnected from the very thing that I started because I was afraid to ruffle feathers or to say what was real. And so that's my responsibility. No matter how smart we are, we have these areas that because we were kids, didn't process the emotion, we learned the wrong lesson, and we project that forward, and then we blame others. This is the crux of the world. People that were hurt as kids that are projecting that out to the rest of the world. And here's where you're hurt as a child if you want to figure it out. What do you complain about most? Who are you blaming for the things that are not ideal in your life? What are the things you consistently are in judgment about with everyone else? Where do you have a feeling of hate, anger, resentment, any of that? By the way, that is the story letting you know the things you have not healed. It's what you haven't healed. And it's not that there aren't good stories of why you're justified. It's not that there was maybe wrongdoing or things you couldn't defend at the time and the age that you were. But the question is, are you ready to heal and live the life that you love? Anything where we're proving something to someone else is simply something we haven't accepted in ourselves. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from, so go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.